Everybody. Welcome to another edition of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. You know, one of the big dichotomies we see in the market, and we've probably seen it for the last 10 years now, is the emergence of growth over value. And we see no signs of that slowing down. And one of the biggest areas of growth has certainly been medicine and well-being. People want to live longer and probably, as importantly, more healthy and happier lives. And one of the ways to do that is through medicine. And specifically, a subset of that is cannabis. Whether you agree with it or not, and let's face it, in the beginning, whenever you have anything new, there's always a lot of controversy around it. The ultimate goal is to allow you to live a longer and healthier life. And with us today, we have Richard Hopkins from Zelira Therapeutics, and he's going to discuss his business, how he's most importantly trying to help you live a longer, healthier life through his products, his discoveries, and his findings. With that introduction, Richard, welcome to 18 Minutes with 180 Markets.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's lovely to be here.
Great. Hey, Richard, people always want to hear, how did you get to where you are today, especially when it comes to medicine? Can you just give us a brief background on yourself, please?
Absolutely. So I actually started life as a boring old scientist some years ago now, and I ended up getting really interested in, I think, the commercialization and the translation of that research to make a difference to patients and people. So we ended up co-founding a company around 20 years ago called Philogica with some friends of ours, and I was there for about 17 years. There was a really exciting play looking at new technologies for cancer, new ways of getting drugs into the body, and so on. That's still going today very well, but I moved after about 17 years to another company which had a cancer focus, this time in animals and as well as humans. Again, very exciting technology. And then about 2 years ago, I've been watching the cannabis sector explode as a disruptive force across the globe. And some friends of ours that we initially created the earlier companies with came back and said, would you be interested in working on this technology with Zelira? They're a great preclinical program, but more critically, what really attracted me was that they were focused on addressing that key unmet need in the cannabis sector for clinical data to support the claims around what this drug or these drugs can do. Because of prohibition, we haven't been able to do any work, and Zelira is literally leading the world in trying to understand that space.
Right. So said another way, what you are trying to do is to really, through clinical hard evidence, prove what works and what doesn't work, as opposed to just a lot of hearsay, so to speak.
Absolutely. That's, it's very interesting. There's a lot of people who speak about the benefits, the medical benefits and properties of cannabis, and they're not lying. It's true. It's clearly having an effect, particularly on quality of life. But when you're talking about N=1 sort of reports, it lacks credibility. So I think we're trying to gather all that information together and harness it, focus it on development of clinical trials fed by that information for the patients that have used it, get positive outcomes, and then start to convince the medical community based on hard data, this is where you use the drug, this is how often you use it, here's the safety profile, and here's the benefits you might expect to see. So all the things that they require to prescribe a drug, that's what we're going to be giving.
Right, and I assume that this is, obviously it's a global issue, so I assume you have some type of global peer review system?
Absolutely. Well, interestingly, Australia is leading the world in setting up a regulatory environment that is first class. It's accepted by organizations in terms of the FDA for any clinical trial that we undertake here. They will recognize it as a first class environment to be generating that data. And so it's acceptable globally. So Australia, again, is leading the world quite literally in the way that companies like us are actually undertaking clinical trials to validate what this drug can do. The United States, you still can't do clinical trials because it's banned at the federal level. So from
at the state level, but not the federal, yeah.
It's legal in 35 states. It's illegal at the federal level, but because a lot of the hospitals would run their clinical trials are federally funded, they can't do the trials. So God bless America, they've given us a huge competitive advantage. So we're literally 2 years in front of everyone in the United States.
Absolutely. And, when people think about medicine and feeling better in cannabis, obviously it's an incredibly wide range. you have focused, I'd say originally, can you just give us your areas of focus, whether it be, insomnia, cancer, autism? I mean, obviously there's so many areas, but why have you chosen to hone in on those specific regions?
Okay, Greg. So I think we just began with a simple question. Where's the critical unmet need for a patient, and can cannabis address that need? That's where we began our journey. And we've ended up focusing on 3 areas in the clinic. We've looked at insomnia. Everyone will tell you that cannabis in some way has an impact on sleep. Anyone that's tried it, however they've done that. But would you believe no one's actually run a clinical trial to validate what its impact on sleep is? We're the first in the world to have completed the clinical trial to confirm that it's a safe drug. You don't get psychoactive effects at the concentrations or the doses we're giving, but it has a huge impact on sleep quality. So we were really excited to generate that data about 4 months ago, first in the world to do so. And now we're bringing that product to market. It's called Zenivol. That will be launched in the Australian market next month, in fact, and the US markets thereafter. So we're going global with this product. That's
right.
Sorry, you asked a question.
Oh, no, continue on. Sorry to interrupt you.
Well, the other area we're looking at is autism, autism spectrum disorder, in fact. It's a niche indication. Around 1.5% of children suffer from autism. But I think what's really interesting is there's a huge unmet need for new medications that are safe and actually work in those challenging target groups. There's only 2 FDA-approved drugs, and they've got horrible side effects. Every parent of those children will tell you they don't like to use them. And many of the other drugs that are used in that space are partially effective. Cannabis actually meets many of those endpoints very, very well. And it's an exceptionally safe drug, particularly in children. Ironic that we banned it for so long, but the reports are that after 6,000 years of recorded history of using cannabis in all cultures, not a single case of overdose has ever been reported. It's actually one of the safest drugs on the planet. And so for pediatric populations, for children suffering from autism, we already know that there's a huge appetite for cannabis-based drugs because we've been selling it in America. One of the other areas we're looking at as well is to complement that is chronic pain. Again, quality of life. Cannabis works very well to help improve sleep, reduce pain, but also reduce anxiety so you can manage your condition more effectively. So they're the 3 main areas of focus for the company.
Right. And may I ask also, just delving in, and I don't know if it's causation or coincidental, but we all know sleep is the mega issue where, let's face it, if you have a lot of pain, if you're not sleeping well, it becomes a very vicious circle, if you will, because now you're overtired and your pain, of course, hurts more. Was that something that was deliberately thought out on your part, or more just the way things worked out?
Yeah, no, Greg, that's an excellent question, and it's a really good insight. So you're exactly right. We felt that if we could fix the sleep part of the puzzle, then again, doctors would feel much more comfortable prescribing our product because that's typically how drugs work. They fix a piece of the puzzle, not a universal solution. So you're absolutely correct. If you look at people suffering chronic pain or PTSD or anxiety, one of the key features that presents for those patients is they all suffer from lack of sleep, chronic insomnia. So the evidence clearly states it's a key risk factor in the case of chronic pain. If you're not sleeping well, the disease gets worse. But if you do sleep better, you manage your pain better, okay? So for all those indications, which are really why people typically prescribe cannabis, we think for the sleep part of that, we can address that using our insomnia formulation, Zenivol, which I think doctors are going to be willing to prescribe because it looks like another sleep drug.
Right. Okay. And Zenivol, just so we're clear for the audience, that will be released over the next 12 months into Australia and the US as a prescription drug?
It's coming out as a prescription drug in Australia in September, so literally 1 month. It'll be here.
Okay, forgive me. Yeah.
It'll be in Germany from the early part of next year, but in the United States, we'll be licensing the formulation and all of the data to manufacturers in different states as of today. We've already started licensing as part of our commercialization model as a means of overcoming the federal restrictions. We just license our technology to manufacturers who are legally operating in different states. Through that strategy, we can get access to the world's largest medicinal cannabis market. It's 300 times bigger than Australia. If you're not playing in the US, you are not anywhere. And so we have a licensing strategy that yields us upfront payments for licensing fees. and royalties on net sales, and all of it with no capex exposure. So we're a light burning company with access to revenues, ongoing revenue streams, recurring revenue streams, which we'll be building out on the path to profitability over the next 12 to 18 months.
Incredible. And also, and just to be clear on two fronts, I think for the audience, just in case they don't know, you in the United States, you do have to produce in the same state you're selling at. Is that accurate?
Correct. So the beauty about, I think, our model, you're exactly right. So manufacturers cannot shift product across state lines. And so they've spent a lot of money building out all this infrastructure to cultivate the plant, to extract it and distribute it. We've said, thank you very much for all that expenditure. We will license you our medical formulations, clinically validated, and it complements their existing portfolios because they don't have clinically validated brands, high value, high margin in their portfolios. So we've already launched our Hope autism product in Pennsylvania. It's become one of the top selling brands in that state, bar none. It's already got 20% of the autism market. We've extended the licensing transactions to Louisiana, and we'll be rolling it out for other states. And we'll be repeating that process for the Zenabol product as well, which is already generating a lot of interest.
Yeah, and again, you know, for people that don't know, you did a partnership with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP, which is, you know, world renowned for being on the cutting edge of so much pediatric research. So that's a real kudos to you. What I want to know is your background also, because obviously you've taken products all the way through, because now it becomes presentable a lot about the distribution, the commercialization aspect, if you will, not so much the science. Has your background helped with actually how to really create distribution, especially because you're going to have to overcome these state barrier lines?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think we're very fortunate in the company. If you look at the composition of the board and you look at the composition of the executive team, they've all come from pharmaceutical backgrounds. Right? It's hardcore, 40, 50 years in some cases. That's all we've been doing. And the credibility of the US team in particular, I mean, they've been doing this for 30 years. They created GSK Ventures. They brought multiple drugs to market. Their last transaction in the US was one of the best US cannabis deals last year. They sold their vertically integrated cannabis business for 223 million cash. They got out of that because they recognized that's becoming commoditized. Whereas the last mile to the patient, a high value proposition. Pharmaceuticals are the most profitable industry in the world. We're taking it back to that. It's a high margin, high value product we're bringing to market as drugs. That's what we do. So outside of the US, the model is a classic distribution model. We've already got that framework in place. We have a manufacturer in Australia who can supply to the global market outside of the US, one manufacturer. We put distribution agreements in place in the UK and Australia already. We'll be doing the same in Germany. We have those markets covered and we'll just roll the products out. In the US, it's that licensing model I'm telling you about with a team that have 30 years of licensing experience. We've already started that process in Pennsylvania, done it in Louisiana, and there will be more US states coming online. Remembering again, that market is 4 million registered medicinal cannabis patients, 4 million. So it's the most profitable market in the world to be playing.
Absolutely. And also, can you just discuss patents? How does it work? And not for the scientific community, if you will, but more for the so investors can understand it.
Yeah, no, you're raising some really interesting points here, because I think what we've noticed about a lot of people that have moved into cannabis is by not coming from pharmaceutical backgrounds, they don't understand that every biotech, right at its core, it needs intellectual property. That's ultimately why you get acquired. That's your valuable asset. So we just started with that premise that we need to be filing and generating intellectual property for all of our formulations. So every time, our approach is that we use hard science to develop proprietary formulations, file patents on those, where there's really strong evidence they work with those indications. Then once we've filed it, we then make the formulation and we test it. So we've got patents that have been granted with very broad claims in Australia and other parts of the world. And they're continuing to expand, if you like, our portfolio. And we've not really mentioned this to many people because we're keeping a low profile, but outside of GW Pharma, which have arguably got one of the best patent portfolios in the world, and their valuation is roughly $5 billion today. We've, I think, got one of the best IP families or portfolios of assets anywhere in the world. So we don't speak much, but it's really important.
Yeah, well, especially as you go to market, as you well would be aware, and for investors too, once you have a pharmaceutical drug that's proven, it tends to become a net present value of that patent life. that becomes the value of the business. And if you can, I suppose, look at your current market capitalization versus what potentially would be a net present value, obviously the disconnect is, is enormous.
It is. And just to add to that, sorry, it means no one can copy your formulation or anything like it. That's the protection it gives you. So if peers come in and they want to sort of replicate what you've done, they're unable to. They have to find different formulations. Well, that's hard when we own the space already.
Right, absolutely. Now, Richard, you've come, right off your capital raise, so obviously the company is awash in cash at the moment. From a news flow point of view, can you just highlight to people what should we be looking for over the next 6 to 12 months, in your opinion?
So I think the company's worked very hard on this part of its business. Okay, I think particularly in cannabis, we set out a pipeline of news flow late last year, and we've executed and delivered on everything we said we would do. So I think we've brought a lot of credibility. We've attracted credibility from the market, recognizing what we've done there. I think what's really exciting is that we've got an incredibly rich pipeline of news flow coming up that we control. I mentioned we've got these launch programs coming out for 3 different products in Australia for autism. It's the Hope line as well as Zenabol, which is the insomnia line. We'll be doing licensing deals in the United States around those products as additional news flow. We've got more products looking at Parkinson's disease. That's an aged care disorder coming online as well later this year. And there's another product line, which I won't mention today, but in the next few weeks, you'll see coming to market very quickly. We'll make an announcement, which is around CBD, but it's another very exciting play. So it's very rich in terms of the products and rapid path to revenue pipeline of news flow that's coming up. But there's additional things that we're going to be filling the gaps with. There's a lot of media interest in the company and so on. And a lot of things that people won't expect also coming to bear in terms of news flow. So we're pretty comfortable that the market's going to like what it sees in terms of what the company brings in terms of milestones and news flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're moving really, one of the transformational, I guess, your Zelira, merger from last year, maybe discussed, has really transformed you into the revenue side of the business as opposed to an R&D side. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So, Zelira, as it was late last year before we merged, was very much focused on the clinical validation side, but we didn't have ready access to revenues. The merger with our US-based peers, who saw the world very much the same way that we did, same pharmaceutical backgrounds, they were really, I think, more focused on the revenue component. So that merger has meant that we've got benefits of clinical trials, but we can pivot the business now very much towards revenue generation and profitability. So at the end of this year, once we've launched those products, we'll complete that transition to becoming a revenue generating company, also doing clinical trials to further add value and differentiate itself from its peers. It's very, very exciting. It's quite unique, these models in cannabis. It's very disruptive to the pharma industry. Just to highlight how powerful this is, we know that last year, $5 billion of conventional pharmaceutical money that would have been spent on pharmaceutical drugs came over to the cannabis industry because people are substituting conventional drugs for cannabis. We're going to accelerate that process with proper clinically validated drugs, which are cannabis-based. So there's going to be a lot of pharma interest as we start to take the billions that they earn today. We're going to increase the rate at which that comes over to cannabis. That's the critical thing about focusing on revenues. And we can do it early because of the unique position that cannabis has, where you can get access as a prescription medicine, but it's an unregistered drug, which actually means you don't need to take your drugs to market. You don't need to do all the preclinical and clinical work drugs typically have to go through. And that's the reason people are, I think, generating quite good revenues out of the market today.
Yeah, so instead of having to spend, for people that don't know, it can take 10 years and $100 million to bring a drug to market. This is not that type of situation. You're not going to have to wait that long.
Come up with a formulation, take it straight to market, generate revenues from day one. It's highly disruptive. And then the beauty is, we call this launch, learn, develop. You launch your products very rapidly, you generate revenues from day one. You then learn from your patients how it's going while they're paying you to use the drug. That informs you, how often you're using it, does it work, when does it not work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you take that data and you plug it into a clinical trial to get further value add, to step on the path to registration. But you're cheating because you already know it's going to work.
Sure.
So that's the model, which is quite exciting. I think this is why pharma is going to be very, very interested to acquire assets like us in due course.
Absolutely. Richard, thank you so much for your time. We just try to keep these interviews short and sharp, but really appreciate it. It's incredibly exciting. And if nothing else, You're really trying to make people's lives better than they are today, and appreciate that. Appreciate the effort.
No, good on you, Greg. Thanks again for the opportunity. I'm happy to answer any queries that may come from your members who have interest. But thank you again.
Bye-bye.